I'm in my car. Just wanted to give a little update and talk. The other day I did a tribute to Dickie Betts. I don't know what to call those videos sometimes. I call them tribute videos, but in this case, it certainly was a tribute video because I've always considered Dickie Betts one of the great guitar players, and not unsung. I mean, he's obviously well-loved and famous, but I always thought, I hope people really fully understand how important he was to the Allman Brothers band. But at any rate, this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Allman Brothers and their songwriting and sort of the secret sauce which came about when you combined Greg and songwriting and Dickie's songwriting. So I hope you'll watch. Well, this website called Wide Open Country had a list of the best Allman Brothers songs. And, a lot of those lists are often kind of dubious. They can be fun. They sometimes seem to, no one ever agrees with them 100%, of course, but a lot of those lists are kind of fun. Greatest guitar solos. And I almost always am a sucker to read them, and then I disagree with this or that, or just enjoy seeing what other people say. But this one website called Wide Open Country had a list recently of the best Allman Brothers songs, and it was actually pretty interesting. There were 7. I actually thought they made a pretty good little list. We could always find other songs that are also great that we think should be on there, but their number 7 was Blue Sky. Their number 6 was Melissa, Sweet Melissa. Their number 5 was Jessica. Their number 4 was Statesboro Blues. I thought that was kind of interesting because I would say Statesboro Blues is an example to me of a great performance. I wouldn't say it's a fine song. It's a Blind Willie McTell song, but I think when people always cite Statesboro Blues as such a great song, quote unquote, a lot of times what they're really referring to is the great performance of it. I mean, you could take that Duane Allman slide solo and stick it in front of somebody singing the telephone book, and it would still be pretty great. So I always try to distinguish between a great performance and a great song. I think Statesboro Blues is definitely a great performance. But anyway, they have it on this list, and Whipping Post comes in at number 3. Midnight Rider, number 2, and number 1 was Ramblin' Man. That's kind of an interesting list, and all those would be written by either Greg Allman or Dickie Betts. Those are sort of the 2 main songwriters of the group. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my thoughts about the Allman Brothers. The Allman Brothers are one of the great American bands. They're one of the great things in the history of American music, really. I really believe that. I think years from now they'll be seen kind of the way we see Woody Guthrie or Stephen Foster or I don't know, just George Gershwin. I mean, they're really important figures. But a couple things that do leap to mind. The Allman Brothers, it's an interesting case because they started out, I would say, as a blues band. Greg and Duane played. I think Greg was planning on being a dentist or something, or Dwayne was. I forget which it was which, but they had a blues band, and that blues band, I think the influence of that blues band, you can really hear it on the first couple Allman Brothers records, which are heavy, hard blues. And I think that, which is great, but I think that heavy, hard blues was, I don't want to say narrower, but I think it was a more defined genre. And if the Allman Brothers had just stayed with heavy, hard blues, we might remember them today kind of the way we remember Savoy Brown. I don't know if you remember, in that period, there were a lot of really good heavy, hard rock blues bands that I guess the Allman Brothers would kind of fit into that category. Spooky Tooth, Savoy Brown, old Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green, well before the Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks era. That's all really heavy, hard blues, and it's great. And I think the first two Allman Brothers albums in particular reflect that. But on the first album, Greg wrote a lot of the songs, but I think Trouble No More is on there, which is a Muddy Waters song. But a lot of the Greg songs were kind of that blues genre. Now, that first album has It's Not My Cross to Bear, and which is a super duper good song, and that's a Greg Allman song. It has Dreams, which is another Greg Allman song. But those are all kind of bluesy songs. Dreams has a little bit of a jazz flavor to it, doesn't it? But it's still kind of bluesy. But the way the Allman Brothers had started out, you had Greg and Dwayne in a band. I think they had different names back then, like bands when they're starting out, and different people coming and going in the band. But at some point they hooked up with Dickie Betts and elements of his band down there in Florida. And Dickie Betts had a band called The Second Coming. So the Allman Brothers were kind of formed in the version we probably like the best, sort of the classic lineup, if you will, was when Dickie Betts came over from his band and joined forces with Greg and Dwayne. And that Dickie Betts element was so important, but I don't think it's as pronounced on the first album or even the second album. Now, Dickie Betts is a founding member of the Allman Brothers Band. I don't think it would ever be accurate, even in the very earliest days of that band as we know it, to characterize Dickie Betts as some kind of a hired gun or a second guitar player. A lot of bands will have like a lead guitar player and a rhythm guitar player. Right from the outset, the Allman Brothers featured two guitars, and that was a big part of their sound. That said, I don't think Dickie Betts, don't think his role really had materialized in those first two albums. Now, on the second album, you do have a Dickie Betts song for the first time, which adds to the flavor, and it was Revival, which is in a major key now, and it's happy. Now, that's kind of neat because, a lot of Greg songs like Not My Cross to Bear, Whip and Post, I think is on that second album, right? And those are such good songs, but they're down and dirty, gritty blues. I think Midnight Rider is a Greg Allman song, and that's you might describe it as a mellow song, but it's got that Greg Allman grit to it. On the other hand, but Revival came along, and I think in memory of Elizabeth Reed, which is also a Dickie Betts song and has a kind of jazzy flavor, not a jazz flavor, it's not jazz, but it's jazzy. But especially Revival, I think it showed something really important, which was Dickie Betts starting to kind of develop more footing in terms of the creativity of the band. And that song is so important because it was the first of their really kind of major happy songs, which would end up being a lot of great Allman Brothers songs like Ramblin' Man, Jessica, Blue Sky. those melodic major key songs, and those come out of Dickie Betts. And I think that's such an important point. And without Dickie Betts and that melodic, kind of breezy, sunny element, I think the Allman Brothers would have been kind of one of the late 60s, early 70s period heavy rock blues bands that we kind of remember. And they had some great songs. I'm not saying they'd be obscure. Like, I would kind of compare them to maybe Spooky Tooth, which is great, by the way. Spooky Tooth, if you ever heard, one of the greatest Beatles covers ever is their version of I Am the Walrus, or Savoy Brown. But I'm not sure they expanded more with that Dickie Betts element, which was that major key. And if you think about it, the Allman Brothers became a jam band. And they, in the 80s and 90s, and really on till Greg's death, were a jam band that played kind of like the Grateful Dead. You almost would think of them as a jam band. And, it's hard to imagine a jam band that just played all that heavy blues all night. A lot of that heavy blues, it sounds like whiskey and, dark stadiums or dark bars at 1 a.m. And those sunny Dickie Betts songs, those are like bright day, sunny songs, and that's jam band music, because jam band kind of lifts you up. There are a lot of different genres in jam band, but that jam band vibe is a happy vibe, usually I associate it with. And Dickie Betts created that. Unfortunately, and I think on Live at Fillmore East, that's probably one of the best live albums ever. I did a review of best live albums ever, and I put Woodstock down as number one. I would defend that just because, first of all, it was great music, but also because of Woodstock's significance. And The Last Waltz, I think, was... But Fillmore East is obviously one of the best live albums ever, and I had several comments in there saying that they thought Live at the Fillmore East was the best live album ever made. I agree that it's definitely one of the best live albums ever made. I do think it still reflects mostly that really early Allman Brothers, that heavy blues. A lot of the songs are in the key of A or D. And it was really on Eat a Peach when you had Blue Sky, that I think, and that becomes a hit. And of course, Blue Sky was one of the last Greg and Dwayne songs. I don't know if it ever was. By the way, Dwayne wrote Little Martha, so we're not trying, which is a very distinct song. But Dickie Betts, that major key element that he added was so important, that bright, kind of sunny, happy, and well-crafted leads that kind of had a melodic motif that they would pursue. I would even argue Mountain Jam has that, because it takes off that Donovan, First There Is a Mountain. That's kind of a, you know, that's kind of a happy, upbeat thing, and they just sort of do a big, long, trippy version of it. But you know, that to me reflects that kind of jam band thing, and I think they have, you'd have to say they got a lot of that from Dickie. And the harmony guitars, I think Dickie had some of his instrumentals that really kind of created that. And the one thing I finally wanted to say is the Allman Brothers, as we all grew up with them, if you saw them before 1971 and were lucky to see Dwayne, that's great. But I bet a lot of us have seen the Allman Brothers several times, and Dwayne's been out of the picture for 50 years now. And with Brothers and Sisters, that was the album that kind of was the big follow-up to Dwayne's death. Although I think Eat a Peach, you know, kind of wasn't really finished because of Dwayne's death, but Dwayne is on that album. But they could have easily broken up after the death of Dwayne, but Dickie Betts really stood up and kind of filled the shoes. And on Brothers and Sisters, that's actually an album without Dwayne, and it's one of the best Allman Brothers albums. And if you think about it, a lot of their staples come out of Brothers and Sisters, and that was even more in that kind of bright, hippie, happy, sunny, breezy mode of Dickie Betts. On that album, you had Jessica, you had Ramblin' Man, and that unbelievable outro of Ramblin' Man. You had Southbound. There's another great Dickie Betts song on there called Pony Boy, which I'm sure you've heard, but that's acoustic and kind of dobro-ish. I think Greg wrote Come and Go Blues and Jelly Jelly. And Ain't Wasting Time No More. I think that's a Greg song. That to me is sort of a underrated song, really great song. But if you think about it, that Brothers and Sisters, which was a Dickie Betts influenced album predominantly, I would say a lot of those most famous songs off that album are the most famous songs the Allman Brothers ever did, and they are Dickie Betts songs. Dwayne was dead, unfortunately, in 6 Feet Under the Ground. So very sad, but it just does kind of show you how important Dickie Betts was. And that's the Allman Brothers that we all grew up with, that kind of jam band you know, group. And the other kind of thing I wanted to say about Dickie Betts and the Allman Brothers is they kind of ended up a little bit with a Don Felder and the Eagles type situation, where Dickie Betts was asked to leave the band. By the way, he got asked to leave the band for drinking too much. Now, I'm not trying to make light of it, but if you think about it, if you get asked to leave the Allman Brothers because you're drinking too much, buddy, you're doing some drinking. That to me is right up there with Keith Richards telling Graham Parsons he needs to slow down. You know, if Keith Richards tells you you need to slow down, you slow down, you know. And I'm not laughing about it because it's actually kind of sad. But anyway, Dickie left, and you know, I'm sure the Derek Trucks and Warren Haynes version was great, no doubt about it. I never did get to see them. I would have loved to. I have respect for both Warren Haynes and Derek Trucks. But I do think to an extent they lost that kind of breezy jam band quality and went back to being kind of a blues band, more of a blues-oriented band. And blues was always never not an important part of the Allman Brothers sound, but they did have that more kind of bright melodic sound with Dickie in his prime. And I even was watching some Warren Haynes and Derek Truck clips of Blue Sky, and I thought it was good. You know, obviously it was great, but I do feel like you could kind of it didn't have the singing kind of upbeat feel that Dickie's playing brought to it. So, and I've heard other people say that after Dickie left, they kind of de-emphasized to an extent the Dickie Betts catalog. I mean, they couldn't really do it all the way. I mean, if people are paying tickets to see the Allman Brothers, they're going to want to hear Blue Sky. But I think towards the end there, they were playing Dickie Betts songs less and less. That's what I understand. But the Allman Brothers at their peak were a combination of that heavy blues that was like Spooky Tooth, Savoy Brown, Old Fleetwood Mac. You know, the Who started out as a heavy blues band, and Roger Daltrey played guitar. And then one day they realized they had Pete Townsend's songwriting ability, and that kind of took the band in another direction. But the Allman Brothers would have been like kind of a blues band. That was, and that always was an important part of their sound. But the secret sauce to me was the Dickie Betts guitar playing and songwriting, which combined, I think he would credit Texas swing and sort of jazzy flavors. I wouldn't say jazz, but jazzy flavors. Diminished chords, major seventh chords. I've been in blues bands, some pretty good blues bands actually, and some of those old blues guys will say, never play a major seventh, you know. But I think Dickie Betts shows how wrong that is, because the elements with major seventh chords, major chords that he brought just added such a distinctive element to the Allman Brothers. And when you combined it, you got that eclectic mix, all very American, you know, Southern American, whatever you want to call it. It's very distinctly American, but it's you can't confine it to any one genre. It was just great music, and I think as years go by, the Allman Brothers will be remembered as one of the great American acts, you know, the way we remember, you know, other important figures in American music, definitely. But that blend, that's kind of what I wanted to say, and I think that Greg, I think he might even say this was kind of first and foremost a blues singer and an organ player, but he did write some very fine songs. And then Dickie, you know, brought a little bit of a different flavor, and those two together were the killer combination of the Allman Brothers, you know. And I know the Allman Brothers have had a lot of great guitarists over the years. You know, for a while before Warren Haynes joined, you know, Greg Allman was a narc, and so the band broke up for a while. But when they rejoined in the 80s, they had a guy named Dangerous Dan Toller. For a while, they had a guy named Jack Pearson. I actually met him and was able to play a little bit with him one time. Awesome guitarist. And then, of course, Derek Trucks. But the classic Allman Brothers sound, what people are going to remember years from now, is the sound that was produced when you took the grit and the bluesy edge and the rough edge of Greg Allman, and you combined it with that sunny, happy, breezy Dickie Betts sound. And it was just a specimen of the best music of its time in every way. Well, I just wanted to share those thoughts. I kind of enjoyed that little list from Wild Country, and been wanting to do another one of my music reviews or discussions, and I hope you'll watch that tribute to Dickie Betts clip. You know, I'm going to try to do some more. I don't want to, I'm always careful because I don't want to get dinged with the copyright violation. I uploaded me playing Jessica, and it got dinged with the copyright claim, and so. But I hope you'll watch that tribute to Dickie Betts, because to me, he is really the critical factor in the Allman Brothers, along with Greg. And Dwayne, as iconic as he is, died so young. And a lot of the Allman Brothers' best songs came out after Dwayne, particularly Brothers and Sisters. Thank you. God bless you.